communication resources, and faster and more reliable
technology.
Higher performance communication resources and faster.
I gotta keep this thing from falling asleep on me while I talk. I should have changed the settings, but so hi. As Sean said, I'm Neil Wyler, also known as Grifter. I didn't know it would say Neil Wyler. Actually, initially I thought it would just be Grifter because, at least in my brain, like nobody knows who Neil Wyler is. But I've been Grifter for a really long time. So who am I? So by day, I work for RSA. I do incident response and hunting for them. So that pays the bills. That's nice. I work out of my house. I just live up in Kaysville, just north of here. And I have been a citizen of Utah, a Utahn, for almost 18 years now. So I've been around a little while. He mentioned I'm a DEF CON goon, so I am the department lead for contests, events, villages, parties, and the demo labs. So all the things. Basically, if there's something that's going on at DEF CON that takes place that isn't about someone walking up on stage and presenting, then that's me. So if you're interested in doing one of those things, just let me know, grifter@defcon.org, and we'll see what we can do. I am Black Hat staff. I started working with Black Hat, I want to say in 2003. Here, I'll go to, I have pretty pictures of me. Let me go. There we go. So I started working with Black Hat back in 2003. I started out as a volunteer. One of the other things I did with DEF CON was that I was the administrator of the DEF CON forums. So during that time, I'm complaining on the forums about how much Black Hat costs because I'm, 23 years old or whatever, and I'm just like, this is insane. It costs too much money. If you just have your own business or you're a student, you can't afford to go. And Russ Rogers, some of you who've been in the community would probably know Russ. Russ said, hey, if you want to volunteer, I can probably help you out. Introduced me to the folks at Black Hat. I went out and volunteered for one of their Windows shows up in Seattle. They used to do a Windows show. And they liked me. And in between that show and the US show, there was the trip to Amsterdam. So they had a Europe show. And the guy who used to do what I do now had packed up all the equipment that it takes to run the Black Hat network to ship it off to Europe. And he palleted it up and he put it on the loading dock to get everything going out to Amsterdam and then left it there. And they went to Amsterdam. So he didn't do that anymore. And they called me and said, hey, we really liked you. Do you want to run the network at Black Hat? And I was like, sure. And they're like, you can bring a team of people. They can help you. I was like, this sounds awesome. Great. We'll pay you. We'll fly you out. Hotel's taking care of everything. I'm like, better and better. And so I brought 2 people. I brought 2 of my friends to run the entire Black Hat network. It was a mistake. We got it done. But now the Black Hat network is deployed by 70-plus college students and run by 21 industry professionals. And then the 2 main people are myself and Stumper, or Bart Stump, for those who are familiar with Bart from the hackerspace or anything. And we... So it's grown quite a bit, obviously. I am the founder of DC801. That came about through 2600 Salt Lake City, which we'll get into in a second here. I am one of the founders of 801 Labs, the hackerspace here in Salt Lake City. If you didn't know we have a hackerspace in Salt Lake City, we do. We have 3,200 square feet of space. We have a dedicated lockpicking room, a hardware hacking room. We've got a dedicated classroom, laser cutter, all kinds of shenanigans go on there all the time. So check us out, 801labs.org. And then, like Sean mentioned, I've published 3 different InfoSec-related books. And I've spoken at DEF CON, Black Hat, RSA, ShmooCon, HackCon, various B-sides, stuff like that. So I've been around a while. So that's why this is just going to be kind of like story time with Old Man Grifter. When they said, hey, do you want to do a keynote? I was like, what could I possibly talk about? And they were like, well, you've just been around a while, so what was it like in the early days? How did you end up becoming a hacker? And I'm like, is that interesting? And they're like, well, a lot of people didn't start out in the BBS days, so bring it. So I'm here to bring it. The old days. Oh. So, So yeah, I'm from New York, so I was raised on Long Island. My parents divorced when I was very young, but my dad lived with his younger brother, my uncle, who was into computers. At the time, that was weird. He's only about 10 years older than me. But I was a very hyperactive, I know that's really rare in our community, a hyperactive kid, and so I made him crazy. But then one day, he was doing something. He used to fix computers and any electronics. So he had like a VCR open on the floor or whatever, and I'm like, what are you doing? What's that? What's inside there? Like, I'd never seen inside one. And I was about 8. And he's like, oh, I'm fixing this for somebody. And I was like, what's that? And I went to reach in, and I was about to touch the top of a capacitor. And so he's like, oh, like, dude, oh, that could have been very bad for you. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, it's basically a little capsule that stores electricity, and the electricity can still stay in there. And I was just like, my mind, I was like, I'm like, what do you mean? It's off though. And he's like, yeah, but it'll just hang out. And that started like a love of electronics. Like, I was like, oh, well then what does that piece do? Oh, that's a resistor. Well, why is that there? Well, it makes this happen. And I'm like, what's this over here? What does that do? And he explained all this stuff, and it just it changed my life. Like, clearly it changed my life. Now, I was big into video games at the time, being 8. And so my first online experience was the pirate bulletin board system. And that's how I learned like how big a byte, a kilobyte, a megabyte, how big that was, and how that related to transfer speeds and baud. Because I was like, how long will it take me to get this game? Because I had like printed off a list of the games and then how big they were. And I had no idea what those numbers meant. I was just like, what is this? How long? And he's like, that's going to take like an hour. Well, how long for this? Like, that's going to take all day. Like, and then eventually I learned what it meant. You can see, like, this is even, I just typed in like BBS, and I got like the World War IV. That's got color in it, so that's pretty sweet. But I got on the pirate BBS, and I stayed there for a couple of years. Like, I just kicked around on that pirate bulletin board system, and I used to post things, and nobody had any idea I was 8, 9, 10 years old. They had no reason to judge me other than by the content of what I posted on that BBS, and that was really cool. As a kid, they just had no clue. They just assumed, well, if you're smart enough to configure a modem to actually get online and you're able to get on here and do these things, then you're one of us. And so when I was about 11, somebody invited me, they gave me a number, and they said, hey, you might like this BBS, which was a hacker. It was my first hacker bulletin board system. And I read everything, like including like the conspiracy theorist docs that were on there that were like UFOs and the government's working with the aliens, man. Like, I was like, yeah, they are. Like, but all that stuff was there, and like how to make bombs and do all this other stuff. And I'm like, this is incredible. Like, it was another opening into another world. And so I didn't have a computer at home. I grew up in a pretty poor area. My uncle had a computer, so when I saw my dad on the weekends or vacations, I would hang out. I would hang out on the computer. That's an understatement. So I would not leave the computer. I would not leave the computer to the point of hallucination. Like, I literally would not sleep until it was like worms were coming out on the sides of my eyes, and I started to like freak out. I was sure that something was on the other side of the door, and that if I opened that door, I would die. Like, that level of not sleeping. So I just hacked all of the things. And it wasn't out of malice. Again, I was young, and so I was exploring. So I was like, okay, well, today I'm going to go look at a system that's in Amsterdam. Again, poor kid growing up in New York. In my mind, I was traveling to Amsterdam. Like, I knew that if I could get into that system, that somewhere in a closet in the dark in Amsterdam, there was a little light that I was making flash because the hard drive was, seeking, or the network light was flashing somewhere. And so in some tiny, no one witnessed it way, I was physically affecting an environment on the other side of the world. And so again, for someone who never thought they'd get out of this crap situation they were in New York, that was huge. Like I was like, I've been to Amsterdam now, okay, where's next? London's next. Washington's next. They would throw away the key. Like today, if you hacked the things that we were hacking back then, today, all the hackers, there wouldn't be this scene because we'd all be in Guantanamo. My first trip to DC, I went with my wife. I was like, I've been in there, and I've been in there, and I've been in there, and oh man, that's what that building looks like. And she's like, what in the hell? I was like, it's just what we did. We weren't going in there to do anything dumb. We were just looking. It was our way of seeing the world. But again, poor kid, I've only got a computer or access to the computer on the weekend. So what does a kid who only has access to a computer on the weekend do? Well, he goes to the payphone by the deli by the corner of his house, and he plays. So I started freaking. So freaking was like my love, you know? I did that all the time. I actually brought some props with me today because I thought, there's that scene in Hackers where serial killer is in the back of the truck and he's putting on the helmet, and then he goes in, he's got the butt set hanging off of him, and but their whole real purpose for being there was because they wanted to learn some stuff and they needed a manual. And so it's not just a joke in a movie. If you wanted to learn about the phone system, you had to get the manual. This says issue 1989 on it. And 9X, so you had New York, New England Exchange. So that was my stomping ground, all over the phone system. And I actually went and looked on Google Earth at the central office that was in my hometown, and the picture on Google Earth has the gate open where all the trucks are, and I went, you'd never learn. So, yeah, if anybody wants to check this stuff out when I'm done, we can do that. But so then I went into the military, and I figured I should stop hacking all the things because it was my way out of New York. I went in the military, and I came to Utah. While I was in the military here, I didn't really interact with the hacker community. I just figured it was a bad idea. I kind of regret that. I should have started earlier. But in February of 2000, which was the last year that I was going to be in the Air Force, I decided, okay, I'm going to go to the 2600 meeting that's here. So I looked it up. I'm like, there's a 2600 meeting. It's at the ZCMI food court downtown. I'll go check it out. And I went there, and there were 6 people, one of which is Travis, who's sitting up here. It's just crazy. We're old, dude, officially. He still works for a phone company. It's funny how we just went to the other side, because it's now I'm trying to stop hackers and you're trying to keep this phone system safe from us, basically, littler versions of us. And so I went to the first 2600 meeting. This is a little self-serving. That cover is the first time I had an article published in 2600. That's the issue, so I was pretty proud of that. But I went to 2600 for the first time, and there's 6 people there, 7 including me, and I said, hey, I'm from New York, our 2600 meeting is in Manhattan, there's 60 people. Can I help try to get more people here? And they were like, sure, yeah, that'd be great, totally, that'd be awesome. So I started printing out flyers and putting them in the 2600 magazines at Barnes & Nobles and Borders and stuff, sticking them to corkboards and universities and things, and then within a relatively short amount of time, within a year, we probably had 20-something to 30 people there. And another year after that, we had 50 to 60 people every month descend upon the ZCMI food court in Salt Lake and just have basically a mini con. And it was awesome. And we had talks every month, and we published and we put them all up online. And it was great. And we'd road trip down to DEF CON together, and I was talking to someone earlier about it. So on one of the original DEF CON road trips, I want to say it was 9 or 10, we, wireless was new, and we were pretty excited about it. So we're like, well, what can we do with this? I know, we get all of our antennas. So we all got all of our antennas, in every car, we put an antenna in, and we created an ad hoc wireless network. And we drove down I-15 with a network between all of the cars, and we set up an IRC server, and we chatted with each other from car to car. So we're like, woo! Yeah. It was so ghetto, but it was the best thing ever. We're like, yes! We had the antennas taped to the windows. We had an old, we had a scrolling LED display that I got from work that I would stick up in the back window of what we called the van of justice that we drove down there. and we would just troll the cars behind us the entire way to Vegas. Like, we had a really good time. But yeah, so the community here, I was pretty surprised. It was huge. Like, it's like, what an impressive group, you know? Like, this is for small for population, but big on caring about security and what we were doing. And I took that even further. I wanted to be part of it, so I did. I started gooning, and I've been gooning ever since. Like I said, now I'm running all the contests and events and stuff. And then actually tomorrow morning I will take off on a flight to Vegas and be on site at the Paris and Bally's to do planning. Like, we're planning right now. So like, you guys are like hanging out, and like we're working. Like, we're trying to put on a big party for you guys. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, and we've been working for months already. So tomorrow's our first on site. Let's see, other Utah stuff. I guess going into Black Hat, one of the things that kind of also helped jump my career forward was I was at a bar. If you're at one of these things, always go to the events afterwards. Talk to people, shake hands, say hi, do all that stuff. I mean, I highly, highly encourage you. I'm what I call a high-functioning introvert. I don't like doing that, but I'll do it anyway because you should. And in this community, if you're not active, you're invisible. And so publish things, get out there, talk to people. But I was in a bar, and a guy said something about a book, and I was like, that book is terrible. And he was like, why? And I said, because of this and this and this. And he was like, well, what do you think about this book? Well, that one's all right. What about this one? That one's terrible. And we talked for like 45 minutes to an hour. And he was like, wow, man, cool. Well, I really appreciate all your opinions on the books and stuff like that. Let me give you my card. And his name was Andrew. He was the vice president of publishing for the publisher that I was just destroying for the last 45 minutes. And obviously he sees my face. I was just like, oh, you know. And he's like, look, man, how about I just start sending you copies of anything we're putting out, and you can tell me what you think. And eventually that led to me saying, like, hey, I think you guys should do a book on this. This topic is really hot right now. And he said, okay, well, why don't you write it? And I was like, I don't know about that. And he said, well, look, I've been giving you free books for like 3 years. It's about time you start making me some money. So and he had me there. So, but I did what most hackers do. You know, I just kept going to Black Hat, and I kept going to DEF CON, and I kept playing with tools. So I set up home labs, and I started doing stuff because now you didn't really need to break in anything anymore to learn. I mean, you still could, but you didn't have to. It's stupid. Why risk going to jail when you can just spin up a couple VMs? So I learned a lot of things, and that was fun, you know. I'd hack stuff or whatever, and I kept doing that year after year. And then eventually I burned out. Like, I was just like doing it for work and doing it for play and doing it for everything. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. My wife and I were going to start a family, you know, my kid's coming, and I'm just like I did 3 books 3 years in a row. If you've ever written a book, you know how insane the deadlines are and stuff like that. It's intense, plus carrying on a day job, just absolute insanity. So I actually walked away from security as a day job for a couple of years. I went to work for EMC, who owns RSA now. I went to work for EMC doing storage stuff, which I'd never done before, in an SE role, which is sales, which I'd never done before. But I wanted to do something different. Like, I was just like, I can do the security stuff for fun at night or whatever, but I can't, like, I'm not learning or I'm not excited right now. And so I just kept doing that. Eventually, I realized that I hated that, and I went back to security. But it was good. It was good to step away. I wanted to do security, you know, for fun again, and we started doing stuff like the hackerspace. Like, I met, like Sobit and Lean and Nemus and those guys. I'd met Metacortex. We worked together at Juniper, and so we decided that we were like going to try to do a thing. You know, and it's like we got a small space that cost too much money, and we did that for 2 years, and that was 1,000 square feet. And then we were like, we got to grow or die. Like, and so we got the space that we have now, which if you've ever been there, it looks like the 1970s, threw up all over it. It's terrible. Like, it was literally an abandoned building when we approached them about renting the space, and they were like, yeah, you need to give us this much. And we're like, we're poor. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, but we'll give you this much because right now you're making nothing. And they were like, you're right. So we won on that one. but we're having fun, you know. But so my thing was like coming back into security. It's like, well, what am I going to do? So now we're going to talk about what everybody talks about lately, which is red versus blue. I wrote notes here because Prezi doesn't have presenter mode. What kind of garbage is that? I was like, what? That's ghetto. You're going to zoom all over the place and you just can't even give me some note space? But yeah, so we're going to talk about red versus blue. So I was always very red focused. And everybody knows that the red team is super sexy. It's a bunch of ninjas rolling around, throwing boom, boom, exploit, what's up now? You know, and it's like, and that is fun. Don't get me wrong. Like, popping a shell in a box is like when you pick a lock. If any of you guys have spent any time in the lockpick village or anything, it's like the first time you pick a lock, you get really, really, really excited. Hi, Nurxers. He's waving aggressively from the back. So you get really excited. Like you're like, I just popped that lock. That's amazing. And popping a shell feels the same way. It's satisfying every time you do it. But like, what are you doing? Like, what are you solving? Like, okay, great, that's broken. Well, we all know it's broken. I hate this. It's like dangling over here on the side of my head. So yeah, you should learn to hack. Everybody in here should take some time and learn some red team skills. Absolutely, because that's the foundation. It's where we come from. It's where a lot of us came from, and then it morphed into a job. When I got out of the military, I did F-16 avionics. Like, I did not want to work on F-16s. I was like, those jets are pigs. I don't ever want to see them again. They're like, well, what are you going to do? I don't know. Well, what do you know how to do? I can break into computers. They're like, well, people will pay you to do that. Like, you just break into a computer and tell them how you did it. And I was like, well, sign me up for that shit. Like, I'm like, okay. So I started my own company, and I did it for 5 years. But during that time, I got a chance to do a little blue team stuff too. Like, from word of mouth, people would be like, well, I don't know. Like, someone would get popped, and then they would say, well, I don't know someone who can fix it, but I know a guy who would do it. So if he could do it, maybe he can tell you how they did it, and then you can get your head right. So I did a little bit of IR work at that time as well, and that's how, you know, it's like, but understanding that like vulnerability assessments and pen tests are not what information security is. There's a whole lot that's involved beyond just, you know, popping shells. So I guess what I'm saying is learn all those things, do those things, and we need people with those skills, but don't just get in a rut if you do that. I'm going to piss people off, but that's what I came up here to do. So pen testers are a dime a dozen. Like, I'm sorry, but pen testers are a dime a dozen, and good pen testers are even, they're like, there's a couple of those. So you've got to wade through this sea of nonsense, and it's like, I'm a pen tester. Like, no, you just used Metasploit once. It doesn't make you a pen tester. Like, nah, man, I'm a hacker for hire. It's what I do. Like, and it's like, okay, cowboy. Like, that's great. Like, a real pen tester does the work, and then they come to you with actionable data afterward, and they say, here's why you failed. And you know how often they're going to say, here's why you failed? Every time. That's right, every time. So, what does that help? Like, what are you learning there? What are you learning to do, like, defense-wise? I encourage you to do the hacking, but run Wireshark right next to it and watch what's going on the wire. How does that attack work? What does it look like? So that when it comes time to join the blue team, you know what you're doing. Yeah, we're Smurfs. Come at me, bro. I did a Google image search for Smurfs, and the one with the rainbow shooting out of his butt. Like, I was just like, hashtag InfoSec. So, like, he looks like he's really bearing down on it. So yeah, so come to the blue team. If you've been doing red stuff for a really long time, I promise you, we need you. You're in an area that is oversaturated with people who are, you know, basically making a bad name for what it is that you do. And are you actually helping to solve the problem, or you just keep pointing it out? We need people with genuine skill to come over and start fixing the things that we already know are wrong. If I tell you I'm going to target your company, like, okay, I have a specific assignment, it's your company, I've got time and I've got resources. What are my chances of success? 100%. 100%. If you go out on a pen test and the scope is open, you know how that goes, where it's like, oh, you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you're like, why am I here? Like, why don't you just pay me, and then we'll check the box together, and I'll go. But if you've got a fair scope, if you're allowed to actually perform like an attacker, you will get in. And if you don't, hang it up, because you don't belong there. So get those skills, get the red team skills, but come on over and come to the side that's actually trying to fix something. So we're trying to make it better, you know, and instead of just breaking things all the time, come where it's really hard, where you are getting things thrown at you every day, constantly. You know, marketing will tell you hundreds of millions of times a day, you know, the same systems or whatever, but at least in some cases a couple hundred times a day, depending on an organization. And the real threats maybe a dozen times a year. But be better than all the rest of the people who are trying to hack you. See if you have the skills. As Mr. the Plague said, come earn your spurs. Now, we lose people from defense all the time because they want to go be sexy hackers for hire. And that's a little bit sad. Because you can be part of like the new sexy. Now, this is from Predator, so I did a search because I'm like, I want to talk about hunting. So I'm like, okay, let me look for like hunter or hunting, predator, look for predator, because I'm like, yeah, turn the tables. The guy's trying to kill all your buddies, but you're going to turn the tables on him, and I'm like, what is he doing in that tree? I was like, you're getting intimate there. He's looking straight at it like, I love you. That's intense. But I just thought that was fun. So that's the real sexy. That is Teresa Vale. She was Miss Kansas 2013 and like one of the finalists for Miss USA. And she is a genuine hunting badass. Like real hunting, like, oh, there's something over there, let me kill it. Which isn't my thing, but that is. But they wouldn't let her, for her talent, they wouldn't let her do archery because they were like, no projectiles on stage. And so I'm telling you, if she would have been up there, like Google her, like go see videos, like she's like Robin Hood, like she would have won that, because that's America right there. She's like a sergeant in the army too, like she's hardcore. But one of the things about being a hunter, which is what I do, is that you get to use the red team stuff. You know, like you have to stay on top of what attackers are doing. What are the tools they're using? What does that look like on the wire? What makes that an anomaly? And so you have to know your network and know everything about it and what's going on at any given time. So I put up a couple things there you can see from hackers, the Ellingson Mineral Corporation, or EMC. And if you remember, he says God wouldn't be up this late. Now, granted, he was also sleeping with her, so he knew when she would be logging in and wouldn't be, but he knows this is an anomaly. This account should not be logging in at this time. And that's what a hunter does, is they know when are these accounts supposed to be logging in. Should they be logging in from these geographies? Do we do business in this area, and are the packets going to the right places? And they have situational awareness on their network. You know, that's a copy of the Cuckoo's Egg, which if you haven't read, shame on you. A 25-cent error in the logs on processing time, told Cliff Stoll to dig a little deeper and see what had caused that anomaly. And in the end, spoiler alert, it's right on the cover of the freaking book, tracking a spy through the maze of computer espionage. It leads to a German spy. And this guy's hopping through all these computers, pulling military secrets down. And it's really, really good. But again, the point being, he knew something was wrong. And I threw, of course, in the Super Troopers, where he's got that great grouping right on the body when he's about to test the bulletproof jockstrap or whatever. And he's like, oh, I've been shooting clean all day. And he's like, what about that little guy? And he's like, oh, that little guy right there? I wouldn't worry about that little guy right there. Like, you should worry about that little guy. When you're doing hunting, it's that little guy. That's the one that's going to make the difference that tells you whether or not you're owned. So understanding, situational awareness and knowing how to use the tools that are available to you. And we hate vendors as an industry. We all hate vendors, right? Boo, I work for one. Boo me. But I put on there the different types of bows. Both of those are bows. Both of them can be used to fire an arrow of some kind, but they are clearly not created equally. So while you're doing all your vendor rage or whatever, find the one who's going to give you the tool that actually works, and tell the one that's trying to sell you the little kitty toy to take it packing. There is a lot of belly aching made about, like a person, even from me. Like, I don't love the expo hall at Black Hat. Like, I don't love it. We used to have like a couple of sponsors. They had tables out in the hallway or whatever, but businesses change. And so we're upset about those vendors and things, but I just got back from RSA conference, which is 2 enormous expo halls. You could land planes in. They're so huge. And I let 2 companies scan my badge. They were like 700 vendors. 2 that I was like, all right, I want more information. Like, so find the ones who have the tools that actually matter. So there's, I was thinking about the situational awareness thing. How many people here would classify themselves as paranoid? Yeah, the rest of you, I'm coming for you. I will instill that paranoia in you. So I am incredibly paranoid. I also, my thing is that I don't think it's paranoia if someone's genuinely out to get you, and people are genuinely out to get us. So, right? I sound like a crazy person. But what that means is that I am very big on situational awareness. I know where the exits are in every room I go into, and I know who should be going through them. And if I see something weird, it immediately goes off like an alarm. When I sit down in a restaurant, I sit so I can see the door. I put my back against the wall. I'm thinking about the exit that's there and there. And I'm also thinking about the exit that's in the back through the kitchen, because if it turns into an active shooter situation, I'm going out that way. I'm not trying to go over there. I'm also, if I'm backed into a corner because that's the way the restaurant's set up, and they're ones that I like, they have really good food, but they have the crappiest, like if something kicked off, you'd be doomed. I'm thinking, are the chairs or tables bolted to the ground a la In-N-Out or something? Or can I pick this up and chuck it through the window and now I've created another exit? So that level of crazy, but apply it to your network. Know your ingress and egress points. What should things look like? What is normal today? And if normal changes, what are you going to do? Like, have a plan, and understand that at some point, it's going to happen. And because of that, it's going to happen. Someone's coming in. They are after you. I wanted to talk about this. So one thing that I noticed, and it makes me absolutely insane, is that we as an industry love to tell our colleagues how wrong they are all the time. When someone gets breached, we stop for a second, we look around, we're like, wait, how did they get in? Wait, are we vulnerable? Are we good? Are those patches in place? They are? Well, I'm getting on Twitter then. Oh, you guys should have done this and this and this. Why didn't you secure your networks? Oh, you should have done that. Oh, good luck using whatever. Oh, bye-bye to your customers. We are terrible. Like, we are like 8-year-old little girls, like, being like, no, she said that about me. No, yes, she did. Well, I'm not friends with her anymore. Like, we will cut people off. And these are people we've known and worked with, and we're just like, oh, yeah, no, did you read about the whatever breach? Now someone's like, great. Well, I spent X amount of time working at Target, but I was there during the breach, so now I can't put that on my resume. And we need to get rid of what I call the security scarlet letter. which is whenever somebody gets breached, we put a giant B on their chest and we tell them to walk around, and they've got to do the walk of shame at the conference circuit for the next year to 2 years, and we bring it up all the time, or someone gives them a hard time. Like, you know, you're having a beer at the bar and someone's like, oh yeah, just ask so-and-so what it's like to get popped. These are the same people that, again, we can stand there and say, given time and resources, your chances of being breached are 100%. So why the shame? Another thing that happens due to that shame, and we do ourselves a disservice, is that it means people shut up when it happens, or they try to cover it up, or they don't want to talk about the details. Because if it is something mundane, they think, well, then I'm going to get laughed at by everyone. People have to resign from their jobs because they get breached. And so we need to actually create an environment that allows people to talk about it, to say, like, this is what happened. This went wrong, and it sucked. And this was the level of suck. It was national news or worldwide news. But here's why that happened. And here's what made it bad. And this is why you guys should make sure that you don't end up in the same boat that we were. Make those changes. Take the steps. Don't end up like me. And here's the full report. Here's the postmortem of everything that went on. I hope you guys learn from it. And we get better as an industry instead of shaming each other and getting worse. So we need to share. I was at ShmooCon a couple weeks ago, a month ago at this point, and there was a panel of a bunch of educators who were up there. These were guys who were teaching network security courses or secure coding and stuff like that. And one of the guys made a comment, and he said, well, I don't understand why we're the one industry that's given a pass. We're allowed to fail day after day after day, and it's just supposed to be accepted. Like, these giant breaches keep happening. Target happened, Home Depot happens, now Wendy's, you know? So it's like these giant breaches keep happening, and Ashley Madison, you know, makes everybody shift in their seat a little. He says, why is it okay? And it immediately pissed me off. Like, you know, this is a shmoo ball moment, you know, and I shouted, because I'm an idiot, and I shouted from the crowd that blaming security professionals for bad security is like blaming a firefighter for the fire. Like, we're the ones trying to fix the problem. Fires still happen today. Like, despite education programs and smoke detectors and all those things, something still lights on fire. But every time the truck goes down the street, you don't think, I wish those guys did their job better. Firefighters are really failing us. You know, it's like, it doesn't matter how much you educate people, and it doesn't matter that they know that it's a problem. And in our industry, not everybody does. We're still battling that. We're in the early days of being like, hey, here's a smoke detector, you know. Fire bad. Don't throw water on a grease fire. But people still do it all the time, and they burn their freaking houses down. Here's an idea: don't deep fry a turkey in your garage. But people do it every year. Every Thanksgiving, somebody burns their house down. Is that a failing on the firefighter's part? No. So when a breach happens, is that a failing on us? Absolutely not. It's the developers. No. Oh, that was bad. No. I told you I was up here to piss people off. So what I think, or where we can learn from, is actually from the airline industry. So years back, airlines were, you know, like a plane would succumb to gravity. It's on all the time. And like slam into the side of a mountain or just hit the ground or whatever, and it was like, what is going on here? And how can we make air travel safer? And so they decided to just start sharing all of their information. So like, what can we do? Okay, well, why is it that this is happening? And they looked at, like, one of the number one things that causes accidents or even crashes is a pilot and a co-pilot who don't know each other. Because the co-pilot feels like they can't question the pilot. Well, that's the senior guy. Like, he knows what's going on. If he says that's the runway we're going to go on, then that's what we go on. And then it turns out to be the wrong runway, and now they crash into another plane on the ground and hundreds of people are killed. Or there was an instance where very senior pilot, not senior co-pilot, and he says, over the intercom like we do, they had an emergency situation, an engine is on fire, so the right engine is on fire, we're going to turn it off. And everybody's like, the right engine's on fire? They look at the right engine, and it's fine, but the left engine's on fire. And so the crew serving drinks and stuff like that is like, well, he probably just misspoke. And then he shuts off the good engine, and everybody dies. Because the other people just thought, well, that's the top dog. You don't question the top dog. Which is why we need to have our Tier 1 analyst having just as much control to say to a Tier 3 analyst, I think we have a problem, and everybody should listen. It doesn't matter what your rank is in your organization. If you are in security and you feel like there's a problem, that there's something that sticks out, that there might be a breach, you say something. Find someone who will listen and say something. And if they won't listen, make them listen. Because it could be the difference between taking care of something before exfiltration or ending up on the evening news. Another thing that airlines have done is if somebody makes a mistake, it's just a mistake. Mistakes happen all the time. We're not going to punish you for it. So a pilot's taxiing out somewhere and they turn onto the wrong runway. Well, they're not going to get fired, but they want to find out what happened. Why did this happen? Did he get less sleep than normal? Are they, is it a different crew? Is it a different aircraft, not equipment that he's used to? Was he distracted by something? What are the factors that led to just turning onto the wrong runway? And they write a report. Here's what happened. They ask a bunch of questions. They're like, thank you. And then they share it with everybody. Hey, guess what? We found out that in this particular situation, all of our flight crew normally stays at the Marriott, and they are always at the Marriott. But on this night, the Marriott was full because a bunch of hackers were there for a convention. So we put them in the Hilton. And the pilot was allergic to whatever detergent they use at that Hilton, and so he didn't get a good night's sleep, and it made him make a poor choice, and he turned on the runway. And now everybody knows. Do everything you can to try to keep the same thing so that we can make sure that these events don't happen. But they share it, and everyone knows, and the guy doesn't get reprimanded. And that means when people make a mistake, they just go, I made a mistake. And we can all learn, and we can fix it. Whoa. Just popped off my ear. We do the same thing with threat intel. So threat intelligence, for whatever reason, at some point we decided that was worth selling, which drives me crazy. When you talk about, again, talking about a breach, what happened after it? Oh, well, here's what happened. No one wants to share that data. Why? Oh, it's private. We can't really talk about it. Oh, hey, you got some threat intel? There's some actor out there who's doing this, that, and whatever. They're hitting your network here, there. Yeah, well, that's our IP, so we can't really share that with you. Not sharing threat intel is like if your phone beeped and you got an Amber Alert and it said, a van with a gentleman in it was seen trying to kidnap a child in this area. For $2.99, we'll tell you what he looked like, what the license plate number is, and how you can hopefully protect your children. Like, really? If we would lose our minds if something like that happened. If they were like, hey, yeah, no, there's somebody bad around here. There's a guy trying all the doors in the neighborhood. Well, what does he look like? Well, you give me $20, I'll tell you. That is what threat intel is like. We should be sharing that. Hey, guess what, man? We're in the same fight together. We're getting attacked by these people. It looks like it's coming from here. They're using these tools. They're coming from these IP addresses. This is the technique that they seem to be applying. You should go and try to make sure that they're not coming at you too. And we high-five each other bro style and then run and go check what's happening on the network. I think this is the only tweet I put in here, which is Richard Baitlick saying, again, going back to the Scarlet, security Scarlet letter, blaming the victim feels good when you can't touch the attacker, but remember that the fault truly lies with the adversary. So if we could stop blaming each other for when things go wrong, that would be great. Now comes the pissing off. Bug bounties suck. And here's why. Bug bounties are great for the company. You get all these talented people and they're looking at your stuff and they're trying to find bugs, and that's good, right? That improves security for everybody. And that means that somebody who's really good at finding bugs can look at all these other companies, and it's not just, Facebook who gets to take that person and put them in a closet and make them find bugs. Well, awesome, but when a lot of these programs, when you find a bug, they say, oh, here's $1,000, kid. Now shut your mouth. So again, going back to sharing, you can't talk about it. Now, I've been doing conference stuff for a while again. I've been part of the DEF CON staff since DEF CON 9 and Black Hat 2003. And what I hear all the time is, oh, the quality of the talks have dropped off. Or, oh, it's that nostalgia for the good old days that people just pew, pew, dropping O-days on stage and stuff like that. And it's like, well, if you take those bugs and you just sell them, then what do you have to talk about at the conference? And if they saddle you with an NDA so that you're not allowed to talk about it, then what good does that do the rest of us? So it used to be when someone found something really potentially harmful, they would write up a talk, they'd hopefully do responsible disclosure, they'd talk to the vendor would do a patch, and then they would get up on stage at Black Hat and they would talk about it, or they'd get up on stage at DEF CON and they'd talk about it. But now the incentive is well, I'll give you a quick payout. I mean, there was just the Facebook bug that just happened. They said affect 1.1 billion accounts. 15 grand. It's not a small amount of money by any stretch, but how many people who know who was it who found the bug? Does anybody know his name or her name? No. Right. We know it happened. Now, if that person took that information, built a talk out of it, got up on stage at DEF CON and said, I found a thing, and it affected a good chunk of the world, it would be everywhere. And we would know who that individual is, but we don't. What we know is that Facebook did a thing, and there was a bug, and Joe found it, I guess. I don't remember what the guy's name is. But then they gave him 15 grand. Aren't they swell? And Joe's like, great, well, I got 15 grand, but I still got to eat in 2 months. So, again, bug bounties are great for the company, but if you're one of these bug hunters, the top bug hunters, the guys who are just crushing it, I just read an article, they're doing about $200K a year, which is not a small amount of money by any means. But if you have that skill, take that stuff that you're finding, do your disclosure, write up your stuff, get up, share it with the entire information security, and make yourself a career, not just a boat payment. Like that, it makes me nuts. So that's how some of these names, these big names that we all know about, came to be. They found a bug and they got up on stage and they talked about it at some peril to themselves in some cases. So, yeah, like I said, that should piss people off when they watch this on YouTube. Hi, Mom. So, another thing. These are, again, random tangents with Grifter. We have a data problem. So the problem is that we're using all of these old, antiquated systems, and we've done nothing to change them to make it any better. Like, it's 23 million credit cards this week, 50 million next week. Well, we're actually pretty good at this technology thing. Can we not figure out a way to make these payments happen more securely? Can we not figure out a way to make a social security number worthless? It's great as a piece of identifying information, but you shouldn't be able to do all the things with it. And if you look at the back of a social security card, what does it say? Should not be used for identification. What is the single largest piece of identification? Your social security number. It's freaking absurd. It says it on the card. What a joke. They still put it on the back of the freaking card. And then anytime you try to do something, including with any government agency, what do they ask for? Your social security number. And what? and not to laminate it, yeah. It's insane. So I think that's another problem for us, because the industry, credit card industry, doesn't seem to care. And they don't care because it means they have to invest money. It means they're going to have to spend money to make these technologies better, and they're going to have to reissue all these things. Look what it took just to get chips. And we're not even using chip and pin here. We're using chip and signature. But just to get them to distribute out cards with a chip in them. Every card in my pocket still doesn't have a chip on it. And right. And so a vendor doesn't even take it. I went up to one of the point of sale systems that had the slot for the chip, and I was like, oh, cool. And they were like, oh, no, like, it's not on. Like, you have to swipe. And I'm like, solid. You know who does use the chip? Target. They do. They use the hell out of that chip. But it doesn't matter that it has a chip on it, because when I decide to order something off of Amazon, I just put the number in and I click it and it comes to my house. And so the reason I put a form of two-factor authentication on there is because I think that's what we need to build into credit cards. We have the ability to put a rolling number every 30 to 60 seconds on a card. Why can't we do that? Why don't we have a system that allows us to be able to say, okay, I'm making a purchase on Amazon, and then put in your code, and then you type in your 6 digits after you put in your credit card number, and if it doesn't match, then you can't make your purchase. Like, why? Because it'll cost money, that's why. But if we can make these things worthless, if we can take this data and make it worthless, no money, no problems. All right. Whoops, my cards are out of order. They're completely out. I've destroyed everything up here. It's so low tech. So, in closing, I was going to make a couple predictions. The predictions are, it's not getting better anytime soon. And that's because we have a lot of problems that we need to fix. What that means is that a lot more focus is going to be on us, and it means that, the pastures are green. So if you are somebody here today who's just looking into security, please join us. We need all the help we can get. But remember, try to be part of one of the people who solves the problem, not who just goes, there is a problem. We're fairly aware. Also, ransomware. We hear about ransomware all the time. There was just recently in the news, the hospital that got ransomware, and it was like they paid $1,000 to get their data unencrypted. That was something that brought that hospital to its knees. And they thought about, we got to pay this ransom. They're like, well, it's $1,000. Will somebody just freaking pay it? So I think what we're going to see is in the same way that we see targeted or, like, dare I say it, APT-style attacks, we're going to see targeted ransomware, where the attacker knows the value of the data they're encrypting, and so the bounty on that ransom, is going to be significant. And I'd say we're probably going to see our first $1 million ransomware by the end of the year. Like, it's coming. They're figuring it out. The stuff they're writing is getting smarter. And the attackers understand that, well, I don't have to go in an alleyway and I club somebody to take their wallet. All I have to do is push this button and they give me everything in it. So, thanks.